Good day. Misconceptions about banking. What most people don't understand about banking and reserves and lending and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, debt does not exist. What? You're crazy. Nope. Debt does not exist. Why? If you look on the back of these green pieces of paper, not the back, did I say the back? Look on the front. You can look on the back if you want, but look at the front of those green pieces of paper that we call money. And at the very top of the paper, you'll see something that says Federal Reserve Note. Federal Reserve Note. What is a note? A note is a contractual evidence of debt. It is an IOU. And you will see signatures, just like a contract. You'll see signatures on that green piece of paper between the two parties involved, the Federal Reserve and the United States. It'll say, I'm not even looking at one right now. It'll say Treasury or Treasury Department or Department of the Treasury or whatever. But it's an IOU. It's what it is. I owe you something because there's evidence of a debt. And that's what a note is, evidence of a debt. So you can also think of your car note or your house note. They're all notes. And what is a note? It's evidence of a debt. It's an IOU. Now, the note will also have the value written on it. The note might say 5 or 10 or 20 or 1. If you go for a mortgage, the note might say $312,468.68. It's still a note. It's still a contract that shows evidence of a debt. Your car note will say the same thing. It'll have signatures, maybe only one, not from the bank, but from you. And it'll also be evidence of a debt. Now, if I have a green piece of paper that says 5 on it, and it's a note, it says note right on it. It just happens to say Federal Reserve Note on it because it was issued by the Federal Reserve. Your note might say Bank of America on it or Wells Fargo. But anyways, let's say I go to the store and something costs $5. And then I hand the clerk a note, a green note. It just happens to be green and small. And it says 5 on it. Well, I've just now paid for the purchase because I handed the clerk a note, a contractual IOU, evidence of a debt between the United States and the Federal Reserve. And I handed that $5 note. It says 5 all over it, in the corners or whatever, on the back. And it prints it out too. It even has it printed out, 5. F-I-V-E, somewhere on that. Like I said, I'm not even looking at one. I should be, but I don't feel like it because that's me. But it'll say 5. It'll have it written out. and it'll have the numerical value 5 on that little green piece of paper that also says Federal Reserve note on it. And you hand the clerk, or I will, in this example, I hand the clerk a $5 note, and that satisfies the transaction. The transaction's paid for because it cost $5, and I handed the clerk $5. And whatever product or products I just purchased are now purchased. So, let's look at a mortgage. Before I begin with mortgages, most people don't understand that most new money creation occurs with loans. It doesn't matter what the reserve is. If you want to study reserve, requirements, that's up to you. It used to be at 10%. Now they're at 0%. And most people make a big deal out of it. But there's no need to make a big deal out of it because reserves don't matter. We have this thing called inflation, where the value of money keeps going down every year. Its purchasing power drops every year. Why? Because more and more money keeps being created. And the primary way that money's created is through loans. So what does that mean? That means that the bank doesn't need the money, doesn't have to have the money to create the loan, because the loan is what creates new money in the first place. So if a bank makes a loan for $300,000, they just created $300,000 out of thin air with the loan. But what most people don't realize is that your signature is what creates the money. Now, let's go back to the example of the mortgage. The financial institution that you get a mortgage from prints out a note. It might not be green. It doesn't have to be green. A note can be white or yellow or green or pink. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color the note is. Remember that a note is evidence of a debt. Therefore, all notes are evidence of a debt, and all notes are IOUs. So, the financial institution prints out a note. It has the value of the note written on it in numerical value, and probably has it printed out as well. It has it written out. And your signature is going to go on that note if you want the loan. And then you slide the note back to the bank, which technically you just handed the value of the house on a note back to the bank, which means that as soon as the bank accepts the note, the house is paid for. What? If you still don't understand, I will reiterate. If I've got a $5 note in my wallet and I hand it to a clerk, it's as good as cash, and it pays for the product. And if I hand a note that says $289,000 on it back to the bank with my signature on it, well, I just handed the bank $289,000. All money is notes. All money is debt. You can't technically pay debt with more debt, but that's what money is. Money is debt. So, let me give another example just in case people still don't understand what I'm saying. Everyone carries notes on them, and they're usually green, and they usually say 1 or 20 on them, or 5 or 10, sometimes 50, sometimes 100. And it says note right on it, because all money is notes, and all notes is debt. And that's why I say that there's no such thing as debt, because you can't be in debt. Because everything's an IOU. And there's other reasons, but I'm going to go over the primary reason here now. But I'll give an example. You go to buy a car. Let's say you go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo, like whatever, some sort of financial institution. And let's say the car cost, $37,000. So you're at the car dealership and they print out the note and you sign it, and it has a signature on it now, and it's a contract that states evidence of a debt. I owe $37,000 on a car. I sign the note that has the numerical value 37,000 written on it, and then I slide that note back to the finance department at the car dealership. And now the car is paid for right then and there. Because if I pulled out $37,000 worth of green notes, that would pay for the car. Or I just sign the note that they printed out and slide it back over to them, and now the car's paid for. Because all money is notes. So I hope that people understand why debt doesn't exist. Because your signature creates money. It doesn't matter if you're paying an electric bill, a water bill, a phone bill, a car payment, or a mortgage payment. Every time you go to write a check or cash a check, what does the bank require? Well, it requires a signature. All right, now let's talk about a credit card agreement. It is against the law. It is against federal banking regulations, Title 12. Don't ask me for the specific regulation, because it's been a while since I've looked at them. But a bank, by law, cannot lend out any of its depositors' money. So it doesn't matter how much money a bank has on deposit or in safe deposit boxes. Doesn't matter, because they're not allowed to touch that money. And how do you know that? Well, because no bank has ever sent you a letter saying, hey, do you mind if we borrow some of your money to give this guy over here a business loan? No bank has ever called you and said, hey, there's a guy trying to buy a car, and well, we see you got money in your account. Can we use your money? Banks can't do that. Banks can't lend out depositors' money. It's against the law. It's also against the law for banks to lend out their own money / credit. Money is also credit, by the way, just in case. So you take your credit card to an ATM, and I want $300. So you pull out $300. because credit is money and money is credit. Well, banks are not allowed to lend out their own money, their own credit. That would be like a company lending out the company car to somebody that doesn't work for the company. And there's been many cases, court cases, where the judges have stated on record that, it's it's well known that banks do not lend out their own money or credit. It's against the law. You gotta love banks. Gotta love them. But once again, let me clear my throat. Banks cannot lend out their own money, their own credit, and they can't lend out their depositors' money, their depositors' credit. And if you look at a publication called Modern Money Mechanics, I think it was put out by the Chicago Federal Reserve Board, but it says right in there that most new money creation, it might even say all new money creation, is created through loans. In other words, once again, the bank doesn't need the money. It can just create the money out of thin air. And that's how every year more and more money comes into accounts and circulation. Now, if you don't believe me, let's use another example. Let's say, okay, what's it cost? Well, the last time I looked it up, it takes $5 million to open up a bank. That's the requirement, $5 million, and you got to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and then you have to be approved by the Federal Reserve to open a bank. So let's say some bank opens up in Wooka Wooka, Wisconsin, and they need $5 million to open a bank. So now they got $5 million in the bank. But are they going to use it? No, of course not, because they don't have to. They're just using it for reserve purposes. At least in the old days, they were using it for reserve purposes. So now a bunch of people come in and say, hey, I want a car loan, and I want a house loan. I need a mortgage. I want to buy a house. And so all year round, the bank makes loans all year round. And let's say those loans, let's say they add up to $5 million. Let's say all the mortgages, car payments, business loans, student loans, everything that a bank could possibly loan for adds up in that 1 year. In the first year they're open, they make $5 million in loans. Well, if people are making payments every month, then how much money are they going to get back the next year? Well, they're definitely not going to get $5 million back the next year, because people are making payments over time, over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. But what does the bank do the very next year? They write out loans. They issue loans for yet another $5 million. And they keep doing that year after year after year after year. But, even at what? Even if you have a $300,000 mortgage and you're making payments, let's say what, $1,400 a month? Yeah, multiply that by 10, that's what, 14,000, add the other 2,800. So that's what, 16.8. So what, 17 grand? So on a $300,000 mortgage, the bank is getting back 17 grand for the whole year. 16 grand, 17 grand for the whole year. Now, even if they issued, let's say what, for $5 million, they'd have to issue, damn it, I should have used something better. I should have used a better mathematical example. But let's say they issue 20 mortgages at $300,000. which would equal, let's say that's 6 million, whatever. And they're only getting $17,000 back from each mortgage times 20. So that's what, $340,000? That's all they're getting back for that 1 year. But yet the next year, they're issuing another $5 million in loans. So hopefully you understand that the bank itself doesn't need money to issue loans, because loans create money. Money is created by the loan. So before I forget, I'll also include the Truth in Lending Act, also known as TILA. In the Truth in Lending Act, you won't see the word borrower. Why? Because there's no such thing as a borrower. A loan creates money. And if you know how the banking system works, then you would never make a payment, ever. Because you signed a note that has money written on it, the value written on it, and you handed it right back to the bank. So I was talking about credit cards, and you sign a credit card agreement, and a credit card agreement is a promise to pay. But once again, there's nothing to pay back, because every time you go to use your credit card for a transaction, the merchant either makes you sign, your signature creates the money. You see? You get it? Is it coming full circle yet? If not, go back and listen to this again. So, whenever you do a credit card transaction, the merchant is either going to make you sign for the transaction, or you're going to enter your electronic PIN for the transaction, which is an electronic signature. And your signature creates the money on account. So how much money do you owe the bank for the credit card transaction? Well, the answer is nothing. You don't owe jack shit, because a bank is not allowed to loan any of its own money or credit. And that's why, like, if you know anything about what they do, they just write it off. They just write it off. If you don't pay back your credit cards, the bank just writes it off. And then they sell the alleged loans, the alleged accounts, for pennies on the dollar to debt collectors. And most Americans believe that, the debt collectors are trying to collect a debt, but there is no debt, because the bank cannot lend out any of its own money or credit. Your signature, just like on a mortgage note, a house note, or a car note, it's a note. That's why they call it a note. As soon as you sign it, you create the money. And the money goes digitally into an account, and then that money gets electronically sent, wired, to the seller of the house, to the seller of the car. The money was created right then and there, because that's how money's created. Money's created through loans. When the United States government gets a loan from the Federal Reserve, well, the money's created at the time that the United States signs the note with the Federal Reserve. So if there's anything you don't understand, hopefully you'll It's probably some shit I forgot, but anyways, I just wanted to let you know that debt does not exist. No one's in debt. Everything's paid for already.